which Oldham over here is strongly connected to the mob. You know?
Oldham is?
Oh yeah. The chief had important friends in both as post and in the DPS. So he could lie and nobody was going to tell him different. And the drugs. Drugs are another big influence. We're so close to the border here. And 95 is a pathway up through the Intermountain. And there's a lot of drugs. And some of it disappears.
Richard Oldham's mob connections, former Chief Gilbert's state-level government connections, and who knows how much missing money and drugs the QPD's officers stole from trafficking operations along Quartzsite's highways are among just a few of Ed Foster's allegations in today's release of our in-depth interview with the former mayor on this edition of Legally Insane News. I'm your host, Kyle O'Donnell. If you've been following along with the release of my latest documentary, Big Trouble in Little Quartzsite, you'll know that the former mayor's various appearances in the viral award-winning film are all very controversial. This is what makes Foster such a kingpin in the film itself. I won't spend too much time introducing this episode because this is one you'll want to jump right into. So here we go. Stay tuned after this interview to find out how you can watch or even become a part of the upcoming expanded series I hope to release this year, 2026, as interest in municipal corruption explodes across the nation. So strap in for the second outtake interview with former mayor of Quartzsite, Ed Foster.
The chief had important friends in both as post and in the DPS. So he could lie and nobody was going to tell him different. You know, whatever it was, these important people, no matter what that officer wrote down in the report, when it went through channels, it was going to get straightened out at higher levels because he had important friends.
Why, even if you have important friends, this was a very public investigation.
Right.
Why didn't his important friends seem to think, oh, well, it's going to come back to me, so I better not put my name on it?
That's just, Arizona is very famous for that. You know, we've had some really big scandals in the state of Arizona. Keating, the banking scandal, and the reporter that was blown up in Phoenix for investigating mob connections, you know. Speaking of which, Oldham over here is strongly connected to the mob, you know.
Oldham is?
Oh, yeah. He's got garbage contracts and whatever. I mean, he knows those kind of people, you know.
I didn't know that.
Quartzsite used to be a good place for money. You know, a lot of money changes hands here in cash kind of money. It's a good place to launder money, you know. It really is.
Yeah, there's very little oversight. It's
Yep.
far. It's way in the desert.
There was a strong mob influence around this town for years where you could launder money through various ways in the town, you know? And the drugs. Drugs are another big influence. We're so close to the border here. And 95 is a pathway up through the Intermountain. And there's a lot of drugs. And some of it disappears. The car was a little car, you know, like a little station wagon car. But these plastic tote bins, I think there were 5 of them in the car. And the officer had them stacked out on the ground, you know, and they were filled with money. Now, I don't know how much money you get when it's all bundled up in a tote this, you know, like that. But those bins were filled with money and drugs. And they put everything back in the car and took it away, right? But there was never any big announcement of a drug bust in Quartzsite. So the money and the drugs disappeared.
Be a good one to follow.
Down there at the police department.
Oh, that's where it was headed?
Yeah, Jade got arrested one time for trying to do a story on a car that was being torn apart back here in the parking lot. In fact, she called me. I went over there, and she was locked up in her van. They were trying to arrest her. And she got out of the van and threw her keys across the parking lot at me. And I stepped on her keys, and the chief shoved me off the keys and actually did take her van. and I got arrested. That was where I got arrested for interfering in police operations. Jade went up there to the sheriff's department in the booking process that I got to be familiar with, and the drug dealer come in, and he sat down for a few minutes, and then got a call, and he left. And they decided there was no charge. Now, whatever happened to the car and the drugs and the money they found, gone,
Well, I don't think I'll be getting anybody answering affirmative questions about that.
Not about that.
No.
But there's a lot of drugs and money come back and forth through here,
Norm made the claim that the Chief Gilbert was on the take from the cartels. Is that true?
I think so, yeah.
What base would you have?
He also owns businesses in Phoenix.
Chief.
And he wasn't above that. He owned a house over here in town. When I got to be mayor, he lived out in Rainbow Acres on the other side of the mountain over there. And that's not in Quartzsite. And he needed a house in town. And he actually him and Johnson and Barbara Cowell extorted property from this developer that was, where the senior center is over there? Where when you go out to Norm's restaurant,
Okay.
that's street. There's senior centers right there at the beginning of it, sort of. And where the senior center is, across the road over here and across the intersection, there's a section of property. And all three of them got property in that for free from that contractor. He actually got forced out of town. Gilbert, Johnson, and Cowell got property in there for nothing. He donated it to him. I mean, he just was generous,
Yeah.
That's what I'm telling you. This was a very crooked. They could do that to a contractor when they said they were going to get even with me. I had every reason to believe everything they were telling me. I just said, what the hell? Let them come on.
Yeah.
Come get me. I'm here.
Do you think that they considered it?
Oh, I got told they did. I mean, they didn't come to me directly, but they told this guy who told me that they told him to tell me that,
What was the exact thing that you got told?
that they were going to get me. I'd never be the mayor. They were going to get me.
So get you politically or get you below?
They didn't define get me, but they were going to get me, And in this town, you have to believe get me doesn't have good result. No, he had a business outside of town out there, the cool cover business, that thing in the park over here with the aluminum cover. He had the business of doing that, making those things.
I heard that he got angry at somebody and lifted their car with a pallet jack or something?
No, he built a building down, let's see if I can describe. You know where the Times 3 restaurant is? McDonald's? Just beyond that, and across the street over there, he was building a store, a shop, a little store. And he had it built, and they come to him, and they took it away for taxes. And he went over there with a backhoe and took the bucket up in the air and come down and boom, and smashed that thing into splinters. You want the building? Here it is. Bam.
Have fun with it. Huh.
Oh, he was bipolar. If he was on his meds, you could talk to him and have a good conversation. If he wasn't, holy cow, you had to be careful what you said because he could go off the handle,
And his son had a similar disorder, right?
Yeah, he's one of his sons. I don't know which one, but it was the one that got out here on the interstate up toward the mountain and just went on the off-ramp and went up the off-ramp and onto the road going high speed and right into traffic. Hit a truck head on.
Was that on purpose, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
You don't really do that kind of thing unless you're meaning to, I guess.
But they ruin people, I was the ideal person to throw the monkey wrench, though, because I was retired. I have my Social Security pension. They can't touch my income. That made me immune from influence, you know. There was nothing they could do to me other than try to arrest me, and I wasn't playing their game on that, so I was immune, you know. They couldn't touch me. Oldham's girlfriend asked me that early on. She says, "Is there anything in your background that they can get?" I said, "No. I've been too busy working all my life. I never had a chance to get in trouble." Yeah.
There's a shroud of mystery around his girlfriend. What's the story with her?
The mystery is that Deborah's not her real name, and nobody knows what her real name is. and I had a chance one time to find out, but I really didn't want to know either. Somebody thought she was in witness protection, you know.
So they created a new identity for her, and
yeah.
I've always wondered what it would matter. I mean, if that would be a viable explanation, then sure. But otherwise, why worry about it?
She's paranoid as hell. I don't know. Like I said, it's a story, but just otherwise, she's paranoid, and she don't. I mean, you go in that sales office over there, and it had all kind of bugs in it, and she was up there in the house recording everything that went on down there.
I was told that. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I did interview Oldham way at the beginning of this thing. I kind of interviewed him. He refused to sign my release, and I spent half an hour telling him I'm not going to manipulate what you say. That's the only reason not to sign this is because you think I'm going to do something to you. And he just would not sign that thing.
That's his girlfriend probably sitting there in his ear saying, "Don't sign nothing." You know? But like I said, he's a strange guy, you know. It's a battle. His family's fought him over his money. His mother left money, and his sisters think that it ought to be theirs. And, you know, he at one time had to post a $250,000 cash bond with the county court over a lawsuit his sisters were bringing against him.
I thought he sued them, or sued his mother or something.
They were suing him over his mother's estate. It wasn't my business. I know that happened, and I never sit down and say, "How'd that turn out, Richard?" I don't really care. It's not my business, you know.
And it doesn't really have anything to do with my doc either. It doesn't really matter, other than it could speak to his character. But he doesn't really make a big appearance in the doc. You know, other than he started the town, and then he was involved in this weird murder conspiracy in whatever fashion, whatever you believe on.
And that's sort of typical of Quartzsite, truly. Like I said, I didn't get a murder conspiracy, but from what I got told, it was getting close to that when I got elected. And they did do Bennett in right before me. Bennett was the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Bennett was the elected mayor before me. Now there was 3 mayors in between. Huntley, Aiken, and Busby were all mayors, but none of them were elected. They were all appointed 1, 2, 3. But Steve was the elected mayor, and then I was the next elected mayor.
Yeah, I thought Berg was an elected mayor, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. There's all kinds of elected and appointed mayors, because this is a town of old folks and they all die off. So, yeah. You know, Aiken had to quit because he had heart problems and he went east somewhere. And Busby died. Huntley, I don't know. Last time I saw him, he didn't look like he was long for the world. So
when I told you my first interview for this was with Rain. And this is weird. I don't think I've told you this before, but about half the interview was her talking about the history of the town and how bad things got and all these other things. And the other half was about you. Why would Rain and Star have such a conflict with you? Why don't they like you?
They were really friends with the chief, for one thing. And it's in politics, the facts mean very little in any case. You know, look at our national politics right now. The country is so divided, and there's no reason given behind politics. I support Trump, or I don't support Trump, and I support Trump because he's a great guy. Well, why is he a great guy? I support him because he's a great guy. You know, they don't give you, people don't, politics is not a reasoning game anymore. It's more of a how I feel, and, you know, and that's what it is. People get to that point, and they're they don't think about it. It's not a debate anymore. I grew up with a debate kind of thing. People get mad, but they still sit down and debate it. But now they don't debate nothing. It's not about the facts anymore. It's just how I feel about it, and you can't tell me how to think anymore. It's a sad state of affairs in this country.
Yeah. Reason and rationale have just sort of
disappeared.
Taken a backseat to, instead of attacking the issue, they attack the person with that issue.
Right. They don't, and it's not. There's no reason to it. It's how I feel. It's an emotional thing, and it has nothing to do with reason anymore.
Well, I was asking that question not because I honestly don't care who likes who. Okay, so I'm kind of on your side on this one. But I've thought back to that interview many times throughout this whole thing, and there was a mayor that crushed some weird thing, and there was a mayor that was involved in a murder conspiracy, and there was a mayor that had a mental disorder. But you seem to be hot on her radar, and I just always was curious why so much attention of her interview would have been.
Her and Chief Gilbert were best buds. The paper she's running was owned by Mr. Aiken, the one mayor, and I don't think she bought it. I think they gave it to her to cause problems. She was part of the group to causing the problem. So,
what happened as a result of the contempt of court by Taft and Johnson?
I don't remember a contempt of court.
So the Q10, I'm calling them, the mutiny against the chief.
Okay.
The town had an injunction against them to not fire the cops. They fired them anyway, so they were guilty of contempt.
What happened? There was an injunction given. They took it up here to the county court, Superior Court, and right away they raised an issue of freedom of speech, which that makes it a federal constitutional issue, and that the judge just rapped the gavel and said this court case is suspended, and we're under some whatever title, and you now have to take it up with federal court, and they moved it to Flagstaff. Now, I went to Flagstaff with the officers up there to see, and we went into court, and the judge come out, and he had a big stack of books, the court proceedings. He set it down, and he looked at them, and he said, well, under state law, you had 2 weeks to file the injunction. Under federal law, you had 10 working days, same difference, right? And he said, but in either case, the time limit is out. So he said, there's no basis for the injunction. He said, I'm going to set you up with an arbitration court in Phoenix. He said, if you don't accept arbitration, you go to court and you end up, the attorneys make all the money off of it, and it doesn't ever end well. The town came home, didn't go to arbitration, fired all the officers, and that's how they ended up in court. I mean, they went against the advice of the federal judge. He set them up with an arbitrator, an arbitration judge, that they could have sat down and worked out the differences. It ended up attorney fees and all, and each one of the defendants, I think, ended up with somewhere around $180,000 each times 8. So,
as a settlement.
As a settlement, yeah.
That's something I probably would have tried to arbitrate as a.
Hey, you always go to talk before you
go to war.
Go to war,
So
I've never sued the town. I mean, other than for the right to be the mayor, I took them to court over that. But I've never, ever filed a suit against the town for monetary result.
Roth said at some point, based on the reputation of the Quartzsite PD at the time of these harassing, targeting scenarios, people wouldn't call the cops because they were afraid.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, cops, if you weren't part of the A or B team, or part of the team in power, you're
exposed.
There were lots of things. There were cops taking young ladies around, doing underage girls. I mean, this was a rogue cop department, you know. Some of these 8, one of the things that happened, the state passed a new law right before all of this started. It made the cops responsible. They could no longer say they were only following orders. They had to do things according to the as post rules, or they could be held responsible. And that's where it started. They started telling tales, okay? And it put them into between the law, you know. They thought they had to be honest. Before that, they were just go along to get along, you know.
And so what you're saying, if I'm understanding it, is that there were a lot of crooked cops, but they saw that the ship was about to sink, and to get off that ship, they put everything on the chief.
Right.
Even though they were also guilty of doing those same things.
They were doing it because the chief told them to do it. Only that wasn't going to get them off the hook anymore. They were just doing what they were told to do. Chief says, go investigate that guy because he wants to run against the mayor. They'd do it.
Did Ponce do those things as well?
Yes, he did. So did J.C. All of them. J.C. and Ponce were the 2 that led the 8. They're the ones that read the law and said, hey, we're going to have to change our ways here and make it right, you know, and they did. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but the chief told them to do it. And what are they going to do? Quit? You know?
Who's JC?
Kemp. J.C. Kemp. He's now officer up in, way up in the northeast corner of the state up there. I can't think of the little town. He's police officer up there. He got completely, his whole family lives here in the valley, but he got out of here. You know?
Yeah, out of the oven, so to speak.
Yep.
So if he did that, and if it seems to be widely known around town that he did those kinds of things, why is he chief now?
Everybody, he didn't do it. He wasn't like Fostow. Fostow did it because he was going to do it no matter what. You know, whatever the chief said, and he didn't give a damn. The others cared, but they had this is a small town, and being a cop was a good job. What are you going to do? Tell them to go to hell? You can't do that? You know, what are you going to go down and pump gas at the gas station, you know? So they did what they had to do to keep a job. But Fostow, he did it with relish, you know?
Yeah.
Or the other girl cop that was the chief's main squeeze, she did it because whatever she did, you know?
Garcia?
Garcia was one of the in-betweens. He was trying to hang on to retire too, you know.
Maybe I've got the wrong name then. I thought Sergeant Garcia was a female.
No, Garcia was one of the guys.
What's the female?
I can't think of her name, and that wasn't Garcia.
Isn't she the one that arrested Jade? You're telling her not to in the
video?
Yeah. So, that was Chief Gilbert's main squeeze?
Yeah.
And not his wife?
No. His wife was, oh man, hate to say it, but she was ugly.
Okay, so what was that, wife swapping or something?
I don't ask. I didn't want to know.
Yeah. All right, so how can other towns look for clues that this is going on and avoid similar fallout? Because it got about as bad as I've ever heard it getting here.
You always, no matter what really started for me was look at the money. Always look at what you're spending money on. You know, now I'm an engineer, so I looked at the money they were spending on engineering, and it wasn't reasonable. It didn't make sense. There was, like I told one reporter, we were standing out here on the patio, and I said, it's about the money. I said, look at all the money you spent on engineering. I said, you can look out over the whole town. I said, do you see one of the big construction cranes standing up in the air anywhere in this town? No. I said, what do you spend money on engineering? And there's no engineering going on, you know? There's nothing to show for it. I don't have a stack of drawings back in the office there that somebody drew up and did some engineering work. You know, there's no evidence other than maybe a one-page report, you know, that somebody turned in, and they got thousands of dollars for that, you know? It's unrealistic what you got for what you paid, except that the bag of cash probably traveled along with that one-page report. And the fact that the engineering company from Blythe had an office here in town.
Didn't you tell me that one of these studies was verbatim like the same as a previous study or something?
No, I didn't tell you that. But I got told by the town manager that there were big holes in these projects. You know, he took each project and all the documentation, and there were big holes in them. And he didn't understand where the money went. That's the whole story. Only to get at where the money went, you'd have to go to people's bank accounts and look. And I didn't really want to know. You know, I knew it, but I didn't want to know it. I just wanted to stop it.
So Mike told me that the cops would do that was corrupt was, this is an elderly town, a lot of people die, right? The cops would be the first ones in there to investigate or whatever.
Yep.
And stuff would go missing. And
Yep.
the families would be wondering what's the story.
Yep.
Tell me some examples.
I still think some of that goes on. Matter of fact, day before yesterday, I was with someone coming through Parker, and this guy that used to live here in town, he owns a gun store up there in Parker, and part of this, it's like two stores side by side, and the other store sells commemorative gold and silver, you know, silver coins and bars and things, and a police chase involving a car. The car went off the road, went right through the corner of his store and into the alley behind and caught fire, and just blew through his gold and silver showcases and went out. And he ended up with a hell of a shortage after the fire department and the police department got done.
We're only halfway through this last interview, and already we've covered some treacherous territory in Quartzsite's short but dark history in Arizona's shadowy past. For the full release of this and all other outtakes, extras, and everything else I release from Big Trouble and Little Quartzsite, as well as articles, podcasts, and other deep dive investigations, head over to legallyinsanenews.com and sign up for the membership that suits your curiosities. Looking forward to seeing you over there. Until then, this is Kyle O'Donnell. We'll see you in the next episode.